يا رايحين على مصر مين يبعت سلامي في كلمتين يا أهل الله، مشتاق لناسها الطيبين ودي ياما فيها مخلصين يا ما شاء الله. وفي أزهر العلماء تقدر تقول ما تشاء، ده أنا والله بدعي لهم رب السما وقولوا امين ان شاء الله ان شاء الله. الله الله يا ربي الله الله، ومن قلبي كده من الها صلى الفجر ولف في مصر وحواليها. الله الله على الازهر الله الله، الله اكبر من الدنيا كمان واكتر، لو قلت اوصفها انا مش حنصفها وكفيها.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, to Him we belong and to Him we shall return. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite wisdom and in His infinite mercy to send peace and blessings upon our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our intentions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us beneficial knowledge, and we seek refuge in Allah azza wa jal from knowledge that does not benefit. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon our parents as they have had mercy upon us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon our brothers and sisters who are facing hardships across the world, our brothers and sisters in Egypt and Syria, in Palestine, in Burma, and all across the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the hardships from upon them and to bring them victory and success quickly and swiftly, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah ta'ala, today we'll begin teaching the work of Imam Al-Juwayni. Before doing so, I think it's appropriate that we consider the biography of Imam Al-Juwayni, the person of Imam Al-Juwayni, to understand who he was and why he was an important figure, and to learn from his character and to learn from his adab and who he was as a person. Imam Al-Juwayni was born in 419 Hijrah. He was born in Naysabur, which is also known as Nishapur. It is located in modern day northeast Iran. And during that time, Naysabur was known for its rich scholarship. And the region in general, Khurasan, was heavily scholarly rich. And Imam Al-Juwayni grew up in this region. You have scholars such as Shirazi and Iskafi, Isfarayini, Imam Al-Ghazali's, Imam Al-Juwayni's student, Imam Al-Ghazali. These were all people who grew up in this region. So you see a rich region of scholarship. From the before Imam Al-Juwayni was even born, you see some of the great adab and ethics that his father sought to bring into the equation to ensure that Imam Al-Juwayni came out to be a scholar. He wanted to make sure that his son would come out to be a righteous and pious person. The first step was choosing his wife. And Imam Al-Juwayni's father, who is known as Abu Muhammad Abdullah, who is also a Shafi'i authority, he's recognized within the Shafi'i madhab, and you can go back to the tabaqat of the Shafi'iyya and read about him. He was very keen on choosing a wife that was righteous and pious because he knew the profound effect that would have on his offspring, on his children, right? And that teaches us many lessons about if we desire to have children, to have righteous children, righteous offspring, it begins from the beginning. It begins from the choice of a spouse, whether it's a husband choosing his wife or a wife choosing his husband. All of that plays an absolutely crucial role in the development of the child, in the righteousness and the piety of that child. And so when Imam Al-Juwayni's father, Abu Muhammad Abdullah, he chose a righteous wife and he gave birth to Imam Al-Juwayni. Now there's an interesting story that Imam Al-Juwayni himself narrates about his birth and his childhood, that Abu Muhammad, when Imam Al-Juwayni was born, he told his wife that I only want you to breastfeed Imam al-Juwayni, the baby. I only want you to breastfeed the baby. I don't want anyone else to breastfeed him. One day, I guess the mother was away, and a woman had heard Imam al-Juwayni crying, the baby. She heard him crying, so she came in and she held him and she breastfed him. This was a very troublesome thing for Abu Muhammad Abdullah. He came into the room, he picked up the baby and he pressed on the belly until he threw up what he had suckled, what he had breastfed. Now, I think for a lot of us, we would think about this, or we'd hear this and we think that this is an extreme act. You know, how can a father go to a baby and, you know, press their belly until they throw up the breast? It seems slightly extreme. Well, this goes to show us the extreme sense of wara and conscientiousness and understanding that these ulama and these individuals, these righteous and pious people, understood towards what it means when you consume something that is halal. You know, he was so keen on making sure that his son only ate that which was he understood to be 100% halal and good. Because he knew that his wife was a righteous woman. He knew that she was a pious woman. He knew that she didn't engage in haram. And so he wanted to make sure that only she fed him. But this woman, who he does not know anything about, there's question marks and there's doubts in his mind. So he said, from the bab of wara, I don't want him to even have this milk in his system. And so, of course, to our modern day sensibilities, this is extreme, right? Because we live in a culture of constant mindless consumption. You just eat, sleep, and you don't actually consider the source of your wealth, the source of your income, what we're consuming, what we ourselves eat, or what we feed our children. Right? All of these, what they understood so profoundly was how the great effect that would have on the person's spiritual state. That if I ate something haram, then it would surely affect my spiritual state, the ability that my children would grow up as righteous people. They understood that so deeply, that's why he didn't even hesitate. He didn't think to himself, okay, well, he's just a baby, or he's this, or he's that. No, he said, I don't know anything about this, and this could greatly affect my son's spiritual state, my son's upbringing, right? So this tells us, very simply, that we need to consider these notions of how we consume, what we consume, the sources of our income, because we all desire to be righteous people. We all desire to have righteous families. We all desire to have righteous offspring. But if we do not consider the deep relationship between that and the effect that it has on our person, meaning consuming halal or haram and the effect it could have on me, then I'm missing a huge part of the equation. That's why historically the pious women of the past, they would tell their husbands before they left the house, they said, fear Allah in where you're going and the kind of money you're going to bring home. Because we can bear and deal with hunger and poverty, but we cannot deal with and we cannot bear the heat of the hellfire, right? We don't mind dealing with poverty and hunger in this life. That's something we're absolutely okay with. But we do not want to deal with and we cannot bear the heat of the afterlife and the heat of Jahannam, right? Because to them it was very natural. It wasn't a matter of go out there and get me a nice house and buy me a nice car. It was more about, I want Allah to be pleased with me, and I want to live a halal lifestyle, something that is really pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jalla. So let us keep that in mind, inshallah. So Imam al-Juwayni, we said he was born in 419, and he grew up under the auspices of his father. His father was his primary teacher. Like we said, he was a great Shafi'i scholar. His grandfather as well was a great scholar. He was a scholar of suluk, a scholar of tasawwuf. So he was a great scholar in his own right, and he learned a lot from his grandfather. His uncle was a great scholar of hadith. His brother was also a scholar. So he grew up in a family of scholarship. And people, the scholars nearby, people like Al-Iskafi al-Isfarayini, someone that he'd spent many years with, studying from and learning from and taking all the primary sciences from. So we see that for all of these years, he grew up under the auspices of his father and all of these in his family and these ulama. When he, around the age of 19 or 20, which is roughly around 436, his father passed away. When his father passed away, this left a huge void in terms of Shafi'i scholarship in the region, because his father was the authority. The most suitable person to replace his father to replace Abu Muhammad Abdullah was Imam al-Juwayni himself. And this wasn't done just because he was his son, no, but he was the absolute most qualified authority after his father to fulfill that seat. And his peers knew that, and everyone understood that. One thing to appreciate is that although Imam al-Juwayni at the age of 19, a very young age, who was qualified, achieved this kursi, this seat of teaching, that never slowed down his pursuit of knowledge. It never did. And you see this as a very recurring theme in the life of Imam al-Juwayni. Until the day he dies, he was a fervent student of knowledge. He always sought to learn whenever he could. So his students say that even though while he was teaching us, he would come and sit with us and learn from us. Right? It was always mutabadil. Right? He was teaching, yes, and he had this authority, he had this position, but that never affected his character and his lifestyle and who he was, because his study was his form of ibadah. Right? That's why you read countless ahadith that emphasize this point, like spending the night in the remembrance, in studies can be better than this and that and whatever. Why? Because his form of ibadah, the way he got close to Allah Azza wa Jalla, the way he wanted to lift himself in the afterlife was through his knowledge and the knowledge that he was seeking. So for him, there was no such thing as I received or achieved a worldly status and I can now put the books away, the people respect me for who I am, so I'm done. No. This was a life pursuit. He knew that he could always learn, and we see this as things progress. So his students would say, كَانَ يُوَاصِلْ اللَّيْلِ بِالنَّهَارِ, that he would connect the night to the day, meaning that he would study non-stop, night, day, night. And he would say about himself, I would only sleep غَلَبَةً. I would only sleep when I couldn't handle it anymore. It was too difficult for me to keep my eyes open, so I would have to fall asleep. Right? Beyond that, he would say that I would not eat except if I was forced to eat, meaning that I could not bear the hunger anymore. Obviously, all of us can learn from this lesson today. But the same thing with regards to drink, that he would not drink until he was really, truly thirsty, because he wanted to keep his mind fresh. He knew that this aql, this mind, was amana, was a trust from Allah Azza wa Jal. And this aql requires a responsibility. You have to treat it well. You have to deal with it the way it deserves to be dealt with. And he understood the profound effect that a lot of eating and a lot of drinking and a lot of play would have on his intellect and keeping it pure. Around the age of 26, a big fitna happened in Naysabur. And it's known as Fitnat al-Kandari or al-Kundari. I still haven't been able to find the dabt of this man's name. He was the vizier during the time of Taghribak, who was the sultan in that region. And this man was a Mu'tazili, and he was a Shia, was a Rafidi Shia. And he created a big fitna at that time, which forced hundreds of scholars to flee from Naysabur and from the neighboring region. Many of them were put into jail. For example, Imam al-Qushayri was put into jail. The fitna is also known as Fitnat al-Qushayri. He was put into jail. And Imam al-Juwayni himself, along with many other scholars, hundreds of scholars, were forced to flee. When he fled, the first place that he stopped was Baghdad. He went to Baghdad because he knew that there were scholars there, so he went and he spent time with Abu Nu'aym al-Asbahani, who was a great muhaddith. Contrary to a lot of people think about Imam al-Juwayni, he was very familiar with hadith, and this is proof of it. Abu Nu'aym al-Asbahani, who was a great muhaddith, was his teacher. So you see that even though he was going through a great mihna, a great struggle, it never stopped him from pursuing knowledge. When he went to Baghdad, he went there because he knew there was scholarship there, and he spent time there learning and making sure he could take everything from that region. After Baghdad, he went to Mecca and Medina. And he spent 4 years between the Haramain, between Mecca and Medina, teaching, studying in a state of ibadah. Right? And that's where he ultimately achieved the laqab or the name of Imam al-Haramain. Right? Those of you who have heard of Imam al-Juwayni, you know that his most famous name is Imam al-Haramain, the Imam of the two harams, Mecca and Medina. He's also known as Diya'ud-Din, the light of the deen. He's also known as Abu al-Ma'ali. Abu al-Ma'ali means either that he himself is in a heightened state, or that he always sought the highest of heights in his pursuits, that he was never content with simple pursuits, but whenever he learned any science, he sought to learn it to the best of his capability. Whenever he engaged in any ibadah, he wanted to be at the highest levels of that ibadah. So it either means one of those two things. So after those 4 years in Mecca and Medina, he Nizam al-Mulk and Alp Arslan being the Sultan and Nizam al-Mulk being the new vizier, took over that region. So before it was Al-Kandari and Taghribak. Those two were removed or they left. Kandari was killed, and then after them Nizam al-Mulk and Alp Arslan took over. That eventually led to recognizing that a great travesty had happened. These ulama were greatly repressed, those who were jailed and those who had to flee, and they were asked, many of them were taken out of jail, and all of those who had fled were asked to come back. And Imam al-Juwayni was asked by Nizam al-Mulk to come back and to Naysabur, and Nizam al-Mulk there built him a school to teach solely for him, so that he can teach and he can spend his years teaching and guiding the students of that time. And so that basically led him for the remainder of his life. He spent the next roughly 30 years. He died at the age of 59, which is roughly 478. So he spent, let's say, 30 years away, 30 years in Naysabur and so on, and then 29 years back teaching in Naysabur after he had left for those years. Now, it really is probably one of the most beautiful things about Imam al-Juwayni, other than his vast knowledge, and he was an extremely knowledgeable person. He was an authority in the Shafi'i madhab. He has Nihayatul Matlab and other texts in usul. He was an authority. His book Al-Burhan, which is his more advanced text in usul, is an authority in usul al-fiqh and many other books. He has books in Aqidah, Al-Aqidah al-Nizamiyya, and so on. But one of the most beautiful things about Imam al-Juwayni were his adab. He really had, in my opinion, tremendous adab, beautiful adab, and you can go back and read in the biographical works about his adab and his akhlaq. He was, for example, one of the things that he was known for was his tenderness, kana bakka'an. He was someone who cried a lot. And you know, when I read about scholars who had achieved the heights of people like Imam al-Juwayni, and you learn that they were bakka'un, they were people who cried and they were very tender-hearted. To me, that says that these are people who lived their deen. They lived the knowledge that they learned. They weren't mere thoughts and philosophical, musings or just words that they were able to develop. Rather, these were deep-rooted ideals that they sought to live by. Right? So it was a lived reality for him. He was so tender in crying at the verses of Allah Azza wa Jal, being in a state of ibadah. Right? So this quality is such a profound quality. And a lot of us today, right, we've become extremely hard-hearted. And our pursuit is almost solely material at times. We seek knowledge because we think that is going to give me some sort of status. It is a very material pursuit. It is a very soulless pursuit. Right? Umar radiallahu anhu would say, if you don't cry, then tabaka, then force yourself to cry. If you don't cry, then cry, force yourself to cry. And you would think that, is that some sort of, am I supposed to perform? Like, am I supposed to just start crying? No, that is a form of ingraining those sensibilities into yourself, right? It is a form of cultivating the sensibility of, for example, crying. And learning how to be tender. It is not a performance that you put on for people, or even a performance that you put on for yourself. It is something that you are doing with your body and your mind and your soul, focused on the desire to be affected by the words of Allah Azza wa Jal. Imam al-Ghazali says that there is a unique relationship, there's a secret between the tongue and the heart. That a lot of us, we complain that our hearts have become hardened. And we make dhikr. We say La ilaha illallah, and we say Subhanallah, and we say Alhamdulillah, but we don't feel it in our hearts. Imam al-Ghazali says that the secret between the tongue and the heart is that the tongue works like a chisel, and it breaks away at that seal that we've developed on our hearts. So we might not feel it, but that tongue continues to chip away and chip away and chip away until one day, boom, the nur, the light of the dhikr enters into the heart. And you become enlightened internally, and you're able to shine externally, right? And so that's why we need to develop this understanding of cultivating sensibilities within ourselves. That even though I might not feel something, even though some things don't affect me the way I want them to, but that is one of the secrets of the Quran, tikrar, repetitiveness is one of the key components of the Muslim's ideology. One of the most key philosophical components of our ideology is this notion of repetitiveness. Because your subconscious, the only way it is developed is through repetitiveness, right? You know, scholars say that 60 to 70% of your actions are based on your subconscious, not your conscious. So I might think that I want to do something. I might think that, yes, I want to pray tahajjud. But if I am not in the process of forcing myself to pray tahajjud day in, day out, then no matter what I theoretically know, it will never become a part of my lived reality until I cultivate it within myself. So this is why it is important to learn that these ulama, the reason why they were so tender and they were so sensitive towards the words of Allah, وَكَانَ يعني يَمْلَأ قُلُوبُهُمُ الْخَشْيَةِ, their hearts were full of fear of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And khashya was because they lived this deen and they lived the knowledge that they learned. Imam Al-Juwayni, as I mentioned, was extremely modest. He learned from anyone and everyone that he could learn from. He learned from his students, people like Al-Qayyar al-Rasi and people like Imam Al-Ghazali. These were people that he spent time with, and he wouldn't just teach them. They would say that he actually would try to learn from us and ask, and they would exchange masail. He never had this obsession, this idea that I am the teacher and you are the student and there's no way that you can teach me, right? No, quite the contrary. They were people who sought to learn this for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And they knew that no matter what the case was, that they could learn something. You can learn from the most knowledgeable to the least knowledgeable. You can learn from the ignorant and the illiterate to the person who has every text in the world memorized. A student of knowledge, a true student of knowledge, does not have these Napoleonic complexes, these inferiority complexes, where I have to force myself in a certain way. No. I'm going to sit down because I'm seeking to learn for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so if this brother can teach me something, I don't care what their status is, how they look, I'm going to learn. I'm going to be humble in my pursuit of that knowledge. So that's one very key component to learn. So for example, after the age of 50, this is in his last 9 years. Now he had reached the highest of heights. You see his relationship with scholars who came to that region, scholars who he was definitely higher in stature than. For example, we have people like Al-Mujashi'i al-Nahawi, who was a Nahawi scholar. He came to Naysabur, and Imam Al-Juwayni lazamahu. He stuck to him. This was a man who was a scholar of Nahu. Imam Al-Juwayni himself was a great Nahu. He understood Nahu very well. But it didn't matter. This is a scholar that he had not met. He wanted to spend as much possible time as he could with him. And so he stuck to him. And in the books you'll read that he says that he would carry him and he would take him back and forth to his home. Until Imam Al-Mujashi'i al-Nahawi left, and he had taken everything that he could take from this Imam. Imam Al-Juwayni did not leave him. He did not leave him for a moment. Beyond that, for example, when Imam who came? Imam Al-Shirazi came, Abu Ishaq Al-Shirazi. When he came, you see another beautiful aspect of Imam Al-Juwayni. He spent a beautiful time with Imam Al-Shirazi, debating with him, and engaged in scholarly debate, which is a very different form of debate than we have today. The scholarly debate that existed historically was very different from the debate that we engage in today. Then the debate was something that beautified. It beautified the scholar because the scholar was able to teach. And the scholar himself, when he engaged in this debate, he would learn because he was seeking to learn what the other had to say. Not only that, but it was a learning experience for those who were sitting. So I'm explaining what I have, the other person is explaining what they have, I'm learning from what they're saying, they're learning from what I'm saying, and the people are learning. And they're not just learning the knowledge, but they're learning from the adab. And they're learning that primarily. You know, Imam Malik's mother, when he was a baby, she would put the imam on his head, and she would say, "Ukhruj ila Rabi'a," into Rabi'at al-Ra'i, and learn from his adab before you learn from his knowledge. Right? Understanding how key this was to the identity of a scholar. So in these debates, you see a profound beauty in how they dealt with one another. How that the end product that they desired, was that knowledge was true knowledge to shine, right? For people to learn the deen as it is. It wasn't a desire. I didn't engage in debate because I wanted to be correct and I wanted to prove you wrong. Or I didn't engage in debate because I wanted to show that my school of thought is more profound than your school of thought and I have to do everything I can to shut you down. And I'm going to go and learn, not so that I can learn and go and get closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, but I'm going to learn so I can make you look bad and I can make you look ignorant, right? This is a very flawed understanding of debate. This is a very diseased understanding of debate. When the debate does not benefit me, it does not benefit you, and it actually misguides the masses. And that's a lot of what we see today. And we see in these blog wars where people have blogs and they obsess over the idea of, I have to paint a picture of these people as being mubtadi'ah and those people are being kuffar, and I am on the haqq and you on the batil, and vice versa. And this we are all guilty of. Right? And I want to make this very clear. All of us, we have a lot to do in this regard, because these are diseases that are deep rooted within all of us. We grew up in this culture where we think that pursuing knowledge is about me making sure that I am the person of authority and that I am in a position where I can judge others. That is absolutely the most flawed understanding we can have of this pursuit. This pursuit is a much more gracious, much more beautiful, and much more divine and godly pursuit. We seek it solely for Allah Azza wa Jall's pleasure. We don't seek it so that I can be called something, or so that we can go back to our friends in our circles and we can talk about how, look at that person, he's so ignorant, and look at that person, they're off this, and that person's a kafir, and this person's a mubtada, and this person is dal. All of these concepts, all of these ideas, all these pursuits are absolutely flawed, right? And like I said, all of us are guilty of this. And that's why we have to expunge this from within our culture, within our person. We have to start with ourselves by ensuring that our hearts are pure solely to seek Allah Azza wa Jall's pleasure. That we come and we study and we read and we pick up books and we have conversations, nothing other than to understand really, what does Allah Azza wa Jal desire of me on this earth? How do I need to spend my years on this earth so that I can make sure that I go and I achieve Jannah in the afterlife? That's why we learn. We learn to be able to understand how to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. We learn to understand, to make sure that kalimatullahi al-ulya, and that the Quran is a text that everyone should learn from, and everyone should be humbled by, and that the Sunnah is the way of the Prophet. This is why we learn. This is why we learn for ourselves, and this is why we learn to teach people. And I think it is a simple point, but to me it is one of the most key points that we have to consider in our day and age, based on our pursuits. Because if we're coming here to learn, and we're coming here to study, and our pursuit is not for Allah Azza wa Jal, and we go back as teachers, and we have embodied within us the same diseases, then we're going to only perpetuate a problem rather than be solutions to that problem. The relationship that Imam al-Juwayni showed to someone like Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi was beautiful, in that, for example, when Imam al-Shirazi was leaving, it was the sunnah of that time to lead the visitor or the guest and take him to the outskirts of the Medina or the city and bid them farewell. Imam al-Juwayni himself, who was a much higher status than Imam al-Shirazi, he would hold the camel of Imam al-Shirazi and he would walk him out and he would bid him farewell. It was from his tawada, not only from his tawada, but from his takreem of scholarship, his takreem of knowledge. He was showing how much he appreciated and loved knowledge. So we see that in his actions, he had not only great humility, but he had a great love and respect for scholarship. There's a beautiful instance that happened between Zayd ibn Thabit and Ibn Abbas, the cousin of the Prophet, where Zayd ibn Thabit is getting onto his horse and Ibn Abbas holds the stirrup, and to make sure that Zayd ibn Thabit can get up comfortably. So Zayd ibn Thabit said, "What are you doing?" Ibn Abbas said, هَكَذَا عُلِمْنَا أَن نَفْعَلْ بِعُلَمَائِنَا. This is how we are taught to deal with our scholars. And so Zayd ibn Thabit tells Ibn Abbas, "Give me your hand." And he takes Ibn Abbas's hand and he kisses it. And he says, هَكَذَا عُلِمْنَا أَن نَفْعَلْ بِآلِ بَيْتِ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He says, "Give me your hand so I can kiss it." And he kisses it and he says, "This is how the Prophet taught me to deal with those from the house of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." I'll close inshallah with a short anecdote or a story that I actually heard here in this masjid from Sheikh Ahmed Taha Rayyan here in Masjid Al-Azhar. He shares a story between Imam Ibn Qasim and Imam Ashhab. These were two great Maliki scholars and they were peers. They were together at the same time, students here in Egypt of Imam Malik. I'm sorry, Imam Ibn Qasim eventually came here, but they were students of Imam Malik. Imam Ibn Qasim, Imam Ashhab, while they were here, they were having a debate. And they were discussing a given mas'ala. And Imam Ibn Qasim had told Imam Ashhab that Imam Malik did not say this. So Imam Ashhab said, no, Imam Malik did say this. So Imam Ibn Qasim said, okay, if Imam Malik did not say this, right, or if he did say this, then I will walk to Mecca and make Umrah on foot. So Imam Ashhab agreed. He said, fine, okay, I mean, that's the deal, fine. They go and they look, and actually Imam Malik had said it. Imam Ashhab was correct. Imam Ibn Qasim was wrong. So Imam Ibn Qasim was forced to fulfill his ahd. He made a promise, he was forced to fulfill it. The beautiful thing is that Imam Ashhab, after seeing that he had won, quote unquote, it was very difficult for him to handle the fact that Imam Ibn Qasim was going to walk all the way to Mecca from Egypt. It was very difficult on his heart. So what he decided to do was join Imam Ibn Qasim. And they walked together to make Umrah. Now, to me, this embodies so many beautiful lessons that we can learn about the nature of how these two great scholars, right, dealt with each other. And they were peers. Not only were they peers, but they basically worked in the same department, if you want to put it that way. Meaning that they were both Maliki scholars, they were both students of Imam Malik. And so you would think that naturally there should be this, desire to outshine the other. But no. His victory was not a time now. Imam Ashhab wasn't a time to now gloat and make out Ibn Qasim to be see, I was right and Ibn Qasim was wrong. No. None of that. For him it was, subhanallah, Ibn Qasim is going to walk by himself. No, I can't. Ibn Qasim is such a great scholar. And Imam Ashhab actually speaks greatly about Ibn Qasim in his when he does tazkiyah of Ibn Qasim. He says, I can't handle that. I'm going to walk with him. So for us, the lesson that I think we can learn from in this regard is, when we deal with one another, when we speak with one another, we need to remove the arrogance from the equation. We need to remove the competition from the equation. It needs to be a simple desire to please Allah Azza wa Jal and to love one another for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to love one another so that we can learn from one another. So that if I have something, I can teach you. And if you have something, you can teach me. And we can both increase in knowledge. And ultimately, Allah Azza wa Jal can be pleased with us because we are sincere in our pursuits and we had removed any type of daghina, any type of hardship or hate towards one another. So, inshallah ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us of those who always seek beneficial knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts and our minds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who seek knowledge for His pleasure. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make sure that this knowledge, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this knowledge a witness for us and not against us in the afterlife. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this knowledge a witness for us and not against us in the afterlife. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our shortcomings. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira.
Allah Allah يا ربي الله الله ومن قلبي علي توضى كده مني الها صلى الفجر ولف في مصر وحواليها الله الله على الأزهر الله 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 أكبر أم الدنيا كمان واكتر لو قلت اوصفها أنا مش هنصفها وكفيها الله